In this video, we're going to cover the useReducer hook. We're going to use it to basically allow our color form to add colors, and we're going to use it to represent the colors down here as a state style value. So the useReducer hook is similar to the useState hook in that it manages the state, but you should be using the useReducer hook when the logic around updating the state has some complexities around it, as it's better for that kind of thing. So you could use state when we're just updating a number and it's quite easy to do, but if we have an array of objects, that sort of thing, we should be using the useReducer hook. So we're just going to import it the same way we would import the useState hook by tailing on a ECMAScript 6 destructuring here. I'm typing useReducer right here. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is we need to bring in the reducer in our app component. So basically here we will go const the same way we would do useState, and we bring in an array, but instead of the state and then the set state, we have state and dispatch, which is a method to basically update the state. So we assign that to the useReducer hook here. And the useReducer hook takes two arguments. The first one is the reducer function, which is basically the function that controls the different types of updating to the state. So we're going to define that in a second. And then the second one is the initial state. So what the state is starting as. So we're going to start it as an empty array here. Now we don't actually have a reducer function, so we're going to write that right now. Equals, and that takes, the reducer function takes two arguments. The first one's the state, and the second one is the action argument. So the state is basically the current state, and the action is the argument that you pass to the dispatch to basically tell the reducer what to do. So in our reducer, we're going to start a switch statement on the action.type. So we're going to basically pass a type value to this action object and case. So we're going to have two actions that this reducer can perform. One of them will be to remove a color, and the next case is to add a color, just like that. So underneath here, each of the cases, we need to return what the state's going to look like after we do these methods. So when we call the dispatch function, we are able to also pass it into the action the color that we're affecting. So when we add a color, we're going to simply return an array. We're going to add the color as the first element in that array, and then we're going to use the spread operator to spread the state. So this is basically going to return an array, which is the current array, but the first item is a new item, and it's the color that gets passed to the dispatcher. So that's our add color method sorted. Now we just need a remove color method. So in order to do that, and so we don't mutate the state, we're going to initialize a state copy variable, and we're going to simply make that equal to the state. We're going to map over it, and we're going to return itself. So basically this is creating an exact copy in here, but we're not mutating the state directly because that's not a good idea. So the first thing, so what we need to do is we need to remove the element in the array, which is the color that we're passing to the dispatcher. So we remove an element from an array using the splice method. So I type state copy here dot splice. Splice takes two arguments. The first one is the index where we want to start removing elements. So I'm going to say state copy dot index of action dot color. And the second argument is the amount of items we want to remove, and that's 1. And then we just want to return the state copy. And then the state is going to become the state copy. Now, don't get tripped up with splice here. Some people make the mistake, and I did it when I was building this project in preparing for this course, is by assigning the state copy to what the splice method does, but the splice method affects the array in place. So it was actually going to edit this value, and the splice method returns the method that is the value that's removed. So if it was like this, the state would then become the only color that we're trying to remove, which is exactly not what we want. So I'm just going to remove that here. Don't let that get you. So we have our reducer set up. We have our useReducer hook here set up. We've set it up with an initial state. So we need to allow the color form here to add colors, and we need to tell our colors how to remove colors. So in our color form, I'm gonna pass it a new prop, and that's going to be add color. So we absolutely can pass functions down to child components by properties, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to take this dispatch function and we're going to pass it straight down to the color form. So that way, in the color form, we can assign it to this button that we prepared earlier. So here, I'm just going to type a function. This function is going to be dispatch. Right. And the type, we're going to pass it the object with the type, which is add color. And the second argument is the color, and that is set to the color. We're going to pass the color in. Sorry, I should have done that earlier, from the top level of the function. So now now we have to set up the color form to actually use this function here. So if I move over to the color form and I scroll down here to the add color function, I need to change this console log to instead be props.addColor. And remember, our add color function takes an argument, which is an object, which has a red value of red. So this red value is coming from the state. Green. Don't know why that happened. Oh, that's not right. Blue. And of course, name. So let's just have a quick recap of what's happening here. In app, we've created a useReducer hook. We've created a reducer which basically handles the logic for updating the state. We've allowed two types of this action, which is to remove a color or add a color. The add a color adds the color to the start of an array and returns it as the new state. The remove a color finds the index of the color that's passed in, removes one of them, and returns that as the new state. We're passing that dispatch function with the add color type to the color form as an add color function here, where the color is the argument, and then in the color form, we're using that prop of the add color function, which maps to the dispatch function, and we're passing in the color based on the state of the color form. So it's getting the values of red, green, blue, and the name from the state from up here, which we learned about in the previous movie. So the next thing we need to do is we need to allow us to remove colors. So I go up to here. We have this container here of colors. It currently is just hard-coded. We want to change this to represent the colors that we're adding via the color form. So I'm going to remove these for now. And because we have the state available to us, I can open up braces here, and if I type state I can actually use the map method, which is basically going to loop over the state here, and I'm going to type color. And now, for every item in this state variable, it's going to call this function with color as an argument. And if I return, just like we would when we're creating a functional component, if I return a value here, we're going to get the component. So basically what's happening is state is an array of objects. We're mapping over that array of objects and returning the individual object on each time this callback gets invoked. Then whenever that callback gets invoked, we're returning a value, which is going to be another component just like this, and then it's going to render one of those for each of the values in the state. So what we need to do is we need to return a color value. So we're going to pass this also another function just the same that we did with the color form, and that's remove color this time, because we want to be able to remove color from the color itself, and you'll see how that works in a second. So I'm going to pass it in just the same way with the dispatch type is remove color. As we know, the second argument is the color that we're getting from this map function. Now we actually need, when we're returning multiple items like this color here, we need to give each of the items that are returned via the map function a key. Now this helps React with its performance, because it gives each of these children of this container a unique identifier that React can use when it's determining where to do updates. Now, it would be tempting to, in this map function, also return the index of the color object inside of the state array, but the issue with that is when we remove a color, the key will change. We want the key to not change for the colors. Because if they change, then it's going to affect React's performance and kind of defeat the purpose a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a string, which is the red, green, and blue values just next to each other, and that's going to be our key. So we just type key equals here. I'm going to write color.red.toString with a plus sign, and then I'm just going to add the green, add the blue. We don't need to add anything else after the blue. So that's our key sorted. We've also passed the remove color function back to the we've also passed the remove color function to the child via the remove color property here. We have one more property. We have one more thing to take care of. That's passing the red, green, and blue values and the name value to the component. And we can do that by typing them all out as we did before, where we had red equals color.red. But because the property name always matches the property name in this object, we can actually use our spread operator again and simply write ... color. So that's basically going to take our object and convert all of the key value pairs within that object to properties in this color component. So here we are inside the color component. We need to add basically our switch, which is going to remove the color from the state. So if I go under here, just above text content, I'm going to create a button. Class name equals remove color. So I'm going to use the same style. Oh my gosh. I'm going to use the same style rules that are up here. Just going to copy and paste that. Yeah. And I'm also then going to say on click right here, and I'm going to say props.remove color. There we go. Let me just type an X here. So that's our remove color button. So we actually, sorry, if I go back, we actually don't have to pass any arguments to this function that we're passing down, because the color is actually passed into the argument up here because it's taken from this map function here. So let's have a look how this all works. npm run build. Sorry, let me just go over here. Really find it. So we have no colors here anymore. They're not, because they were hard coded in, and we've removed that from the project, and we've made it dynamic. So if I was to create a color, say I create this red color, let's call this pale red, and I click add color, it's going to add it down here as one of our color cards. And I can keep going, can create a nice blue. Yeah, I'm going to call this pale blue. Let's add a purple, because everyone loves purple. Maybe not that vibrant. Go this dark purple. And as you can see, it's adding the color to the top of the state with the rest of them, which is what the reducer does when we add a color. And we can also click these buttons and they will remove a color. So if I click it on this blue here, it's going to remove that blue from the state. So just to recap, in this video, we created a state not using the useState hook, but using the useReducer hook. We initiated it with an initial value of an empty array, and we've, in the reducer function that we also passed to that hook, we've defined all of our logic around updating that state, which involved adding colors and removing colors. We've then passed those methods to the components where that interactive engagement should exist. So in the color form, we've allowed us to add colors by passing it as an add color function to that element, and we've allowed you to delete colors by passing the remove color function as a prop to the actual color itself. So there you have it. That's the useReducer hook. It should be used if the logic around updating the state has some complexities to it. If the state is a very basic piece of data, then you can continue to use useState.